Ready at Dawn is a development team formed in 2003 by former members of Naughty Dog and Blizzard Entertainment as a second-party developer to Sony. Throughout the years, they've developed PlayStation AAA spin-offs for the PSP, including God of War, Daxter, and also a Nintendo Wii port of Okami. So while most of their games are just spin-offs of already popular franchises, they're really good ones which convinced Sony to give Ready at Dawn a chance at their own IP. In 2010, Ready at Dawn began development of a new shooter and was announced at E3 2013 that it will be released for the upcoming PlayStation 4. On February 2015, the Order 1886 was released worldwide. The first thing that got my attention was the graphics. I mean, just look at it. It's a staple of how an 8th generation video game should look. The cities, underground, the blimp. It looks like you're experiencing London in 1886. When it comes to production value, this is higher than almost any other PlayStation 4 game I've seen as of 2016, and proves that the game designers put a lot of effort into this. If I do have a criticism, the aspect ratio is 2.35 by 1. It may look more cinematic at first, but honestly it just looks like it's 16 by 9 with 2 bars blocking most of the screen the whole time, which gets in the way during gameplay.
But do be careful.
Do not be fooled by how it looks, because everything else is a massive disappointment. Sir Galahad, a dedicated member of the Order, is sent by the Council to fix the problems of rebel attacks and werewolf half-breeders in the year 1886, ironically, only to find there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. I don't know, that's the best explanation I can come up with without spoiling anything. It's meant to be a retelling of London history with slightly advanced technology and werewolves, but it has so many twists and turns I thought it legitimately gave me a headache. The first hour I didn't even pay that much attention because I was bored by the lack of gameplay. Oh, we'll get to that. The story begins with Galahad escaping a prison after being tortured, then it cuts to him being part of the Order.
Enjoying a stroll in the park, are we?
Nothing quite like a chilly London morning to stimulate the senses.
Reminds me a lot of Uncharted 2. The way the game starts is unnecessary because you'll be playing through the game already knowing how it's going to end up. It's not like it's a tutorial to learn the controls because there's barely any interactivity and it holds your hand the entire time. It's not the worst story in the world, but I found it very hard to understand and the cutscenes drawn on way too much, and by that I mean it takes up more than half the game. Plus, you can't skip them. There's even one cutscene that takes up an entire chapter. The whole point of cutscenes is to give players a rest and keep them engaged with the story. This makes me feel bored and want to play something else instead. And to top it all off, it has one of the worst endings in video game history. I mean, what happened to the supporting characters and main antagonist? All the twists and turns leave so many plot holes, it begs for a sequel.
I'll join you shortly. And don't you know, I'm Galahad no more.
The gameplay. What the fuck were they thinking? I mean, where do I even begin? It's a third-person shooter that feels a little bit like Gears of War, but barely tries anything new apart from using weapons that, while they might not have existed in real-life 1886, we already have in other video games.
Rebel down!
Apart from not being able to switch sides while aiming from the hip, there's nothing really wrong with the controls. It's just that it's only a fraction of the whole thing, with the rest of the game consisting of quick-time events and walking around picking up unnecessary objects. But the worst part of the Order 1886, which the developers should never have gotten away with, is the Rogue Warrior standards of gameplay time. It only took me about 4 to 5 hours to beat, which is unacceptable. When rumors circulated before release that the gameplay time was going to be as short as it turned out to be, the game designers would come out by saying it actually takes about 8 to 10 hours to beat. What a solution. Just lie to us. And there's no replayability either. No special items to find, no upgrades, no multiplayer. It's the epitome of a one-dimensional video game where you just go through the motions, and once it's done, you don't feel like playing it again. You can tell the game designers resorted to desperate measures to increase the gameplay time by not allowing you to skip cutscenes and barely run when you really want to. 55% cutscenes, 30% walking around, 15% QuickTime events, and 10% actual gameplay. I know, these aren't the most accurate percentages, but this sums up the Order 1886 in a nutshell. It's incredibly detailed, but also incredibly short, boring, repetitive, and unoriginal.
We deserve better. You and I.
The Order 1886 gets a 4.5 out of 10. I wouldn't waste my money on this just on the gameplay time alone. Paying full retail price for a game that takes about 5 hours to beat with only an hour of actual gameplay is criminal. Just spend your money on something better. There are plenty of great PS4 exclusives like Ratchet & Clank, Uncharted, and Bloodborne. The Order 1886 should have been a movie, not a video game. It's the 21st century equivalent of a Sega CD or Laserdisc active game when it was brand new. A heavier emphasis on graphics rather than gameplay. If that metaphor didn't make sense to you, then I got another. It's like a Michael Bay movie. It looks amazing, but at the end of the movie, it makes you go, meh, it's not that good. That being said, however, I kind of hope Ready at Dawn announce a sequel because the potential is there and all the flaws the Order has can be easily fixed. Just make it 3 times as long, give the player more interactivity, a reason to play it again, and multiplayer. But for now, again, don't bother wasting money on this.
Friend, you don't have to do this.